Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Roxanne Vargas, NBC6 anchor here. Please call me Roxy. We're going to dive into quite the conversation, a conversation that certainly has been ongoing, not only in the sports world, but certainly across the community. Of course, former Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores, fired by the Miami Dolphins. And yesterday, on the first day of Black History Month, the 1st of February, coming out publicly addressing or issuing a controversial lawsuit against the National Football League, taking on the NFL and three teams, including the Miami Dolphins. Former coach Flores certainly making the headlines this morning, making the national tours, speaking with national media. And again, it's something that has really just halted the community now. And a lot of you are talking about it online, and we want to talk about it right here, right now. So we certainly thank you for joining us live across our NBC6 Facebook page and all of our digital platforms as we stream this conversation. And we invite you to share your questions. We're going to try to get to all of them we can today. Someone, if you're a sports fan, especially of the Miami Dolphins, someone who you probably follow not only on social media, on Twitter, but read his columns as well in the Sentinel, is Mr. Omar Kelly, beat reporter here. Omar, listen to your stuff, read your stuff. Appreciate your time and expertise. I'm sure you've had nothing going on the last couple of days about this at all, right?
It's been relatively busy for the last 3 weeks, but it became super busy yesterday.
I got to tell you didn't think, I bet you thought that most of your conversations heading into this week was how we still don't have a candidate here for the Miami Dolphins. We still don't have a coach. And then this certainly shifted yesterday, quite a different conversation within the last couple of days here, Omar. So I just want to get your initial take when you saw this news break of this lawsuit, this class action lawsuit from former coach Flores against the National Football League, the NFL, and these three teams. What was your first take?
Well, I think that my first thought was that, wow, it's about time. I found it odd that it was a coach that I covered who was experiencing all of this adversity in terms of finding a job, keeping a job. But it's a story that I hear very often in amongst African-American coaches and African-American executives about how opportunities or genuine opportunities are presented to them, or how they have to work twice as hard to get the same amount of opportunity or the same job or the same amount of pay. These are things that are systemic. There is systemic racism in the NFL. For those who don't know, that's the reason that they have the Rooney Rule. That's the reason why they strengthened the Rooney Rule last offseason, because it wasn't working well enough. And then here you have another coaching cycle of hires where they've got 9 opportunities, 9 openings, and yet 5 of the jobs have been filled, soon to be 6 when Jim Harbaugh accepts the Minnesota Vikings job. None of them are given to minorities. None of them are given to African Americans. And people are asking, what is the problem? Well, Brian Flores has, caught a team red-handed, bringing him in for a sham interview. And it's calling out the league for its double standards and the fact that the Rooney Rule isn't being affected, and coaches that are involved in it are being negatively affected.
Omar, I want to stop right there because you said the Rooney Rule. We've heard a lot about the Rooney Rule. This was enacted in 2003 in order to give minorities, individuals, an opportunity, right?
Equal footing. So let's break down a little bit more about this, because I know that you certainly understand this. And I want to make sure all of our viewers who are joining us in this conversation right now, we've heard the term, we hear about it here and there, but what's the most important takeaway about this rule? And is it just the right idea here, the Rooney Rule, or do we need to strengthen it yet again? Well, it was strengthened last offseason. Instead of them having to interview one minority coach, now it became 2, or one executive for the front office. Now it became 2 and maybe a woman. They also enhanced it for the coordinator positions, which I've always felt was the glass ceiling. If African Americans or people of color can't become coordinators, how are they going to become head coaches? Mm-hmm. So they put it in place where you have to at least interview one candidate for the coordinator position. Unfortunately, when you really think about how the NFL hires and how the NFL operates, and it is a league of nepotism, or is a league of who you know, as is most industries and businesses. Most people get hired as a general manager with a head coach being named. They already have either a short list or this is my guy. I'm going to hire this guy we're gonna build this thing together. And then when you get to the coach hire, let's say for instance the New York Giants, which is part of the lawsuit because of Brian Flores, Joe Schoen, who worked here in Miami before he went on to become the #2 in Buffalo, he's worked with Brian Daboll, who got the job over Brian Flores, and they both come from the Buffalo Bills organization. You don't think that Joe Schoen sold the New York Giants, that Brian Daboll was their guy? Obviously, they interviewed Brian Flores as a backup plan in case they couldn't get a deal done. But what Flores feels slighted by is the fact that this decision was already made before he even held my second round of interviews, and he has a valid claim. And this happens all the time in the NFL. The problem is the NFL just doesn't get called out about it. And right now, Flores is, class action lawsuit, because what people don't need to understand is this isn't just about him. This is about a systemic problem, and everybody who is affected by this problem, meaning generally all of those who are interviewed for these Rooney Rule opportunities or sham of interviews, as he says in his lawsuit. This is negatively impacting us, and we need to create better change. And the lawsuit even proposes ways that they can create better change in terms of the league's hiring practices.
And I think that's important, not just to talking about the issues. That is first and foremost the conversation. And here's the thing, Omar. We've been here before. We've had these conversations. Colin Kaepernick, we haven't talked about him in quite some time, right? What happened to his movement and what that did to the National Football League, that conversation that started, and how Stephen Ross responded years later at the death and murder of George Floyd, and how Stephen Ross was like, hold on a second, we need to take pause here. Maybe we haven't handled this. I'm sorry, Roger Goodell, rather. We haven't handled this the way we should have. So we've been here before. So what's different now? Is it the fact that you have a coach who was fired for multiple reasons, but pretty much, my understanding is the organization wanted to function one way. Coach Flores wanted to come in and win. And we're going to talk about this tank bounty. I want to talk about that in the $100,000 that we keep hearing about. I want to go there now. But what's different here? What's different in this moment? Is it because you have this coach that's taking on the NFL, an organization, and an organization that if you look at the makeup of it, you have 32 teams, you have one black coach with the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, and you look at the ownership. And it's very clear that there's a difference between the people that are in the executive offices that are making the decisions and the people who are on the field that are playing right now.
It's funny that you say that, and you bring up Mike Tomlin, who is the one African-American head coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's one of the few coaches that have never produced anything but he has never produced a losing record in the NFL. Has won championships with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But he interviewed for the Dolphins job in 2007 when they hired Cam Cameron. And they were thoroughly impressed by him, unlike when they interviewed Cam Cameron. His initial interview wasn't good. But the reason that he justified not hiring Mike Tomlin was because he was too hip-hop at the time. They just couldn't connect with him. And I think that's part of the issue that happens with African-American coaches when they're interviewing for these GMs and African-American coaches when they're interviewing for GM jobs or coaching jobs. They just don't connect with the people in positions of power. Now, in fairness to the Miami Dolphins, they have the most diverse front office, organization. Steve Ross has been a major advocate for diversity. And in fact, they had a woman in a position of power before it was trendy or okay to have a woman in a position of power. And they were often criticized for that for a specific era of time. Dolphins were one of the organizations, the only organization with African-American head coach and an African-American GM. And then the two executives under the GM are both also African-American. So I'm not necessarily certain that the diversity or the fairness necessarily impacted Flores from a Dolphin standpoint, but how he was portrayed when he left, that can correlate to what his claims are, because Flores always had this issue about being perceived as the angry black male or being perceived as somebody who's difficult to work with. And oftentimes that's a label that African Americans will get, primarily African American males. And the Dolphins, or people associated with the Dolphins, or people around the situation, gave Flores that label on his way out. And that made it hard for him to get jobs, or hard for him to sell people that he was the right leader for their organization. And whether true or just, it's a harsh label for any African American to overcome. Whereas a white counterpart probably would just shoulder off that label. Okay, I'm direct, I'm demanding. That makes me a good head coach. That doesn't necessarily make me difficult to work with. And if you look at Flores' body of work, he was the first Dolphins coach since 2002, 2003 to produce back-to-back winning seasons. Yes, this team had its struggles. Yes, they had issues. Yes, Flores was a difficult individual to work with, but he did get the job done, and he deserved another season. He deserved the fourth season. Unfortunately, Steve Ross and the general manager, Chris Greer, and also Tua, let me call it as it is, they didn't necessarily want to continue to work with Flores.
So let's talk about a coach who, when we would see him in press conferences and stories that NBC6 sports anchor Ruthie Polinsky would put together, we always heard Coach Flores talk about how he wants to win. When they lost, you could see it, as most coaches, right? That's what you want in a coach for any sport, but certainly across the NFL. We certainly saw that grit and that grind whenever we as fans, right, as viewers would see Coach Flores talk about a loss or a win. Then I think anybody who follows football, if your team isn't the best, as you start to narrow down to the end of the season, you're like, oh, well, you start thinking about the draft, right? Let's talk about this tank bounty, a term that maybe anybody who's not very well versed in the ways of sports and the ways of how this works have certainly learned about now. This alleged $100,000 that is put in this class action lawsuit. That
the smoking gun.
The smoking gun, sir. Yes, the $100,000 that Flores alleges that Stephen Ross said he would give him for every loss. I want a team to tank so we have a better position in the draft. This tampering, if you will, towards the end. That messes with the integrity of the game. It's written in the contract, the integrity of the game. But then you have this behind the scenes. Right, that happened.
It messes with the integrity of the game, but professional sports teams do it all the time. And the Dolphins, it's no secret to anybody who was a Dolphins fan. In 2019, this team was supposed to be tanking for Tua. It was a whole slogan that people wore jerseys, tanking for Tua. Unfortunately, for Dolphin fans, Brian Flores didn't buy into it, and Brian Flores was trying to win games. And I completely understand why he was trying to win games and why he didn't buy into it. But if you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, who did tank that season and ended up with Joe Burrow, they're now playing in the Super Bowl. So anybody who has this perception that, oh my gosh, tanking is so bad, it's such a horrible thing, well, then explain to me how the Cincinnati Bengals just made it to the Super Bowl in their second season with Joe Burrow as their quarterback. Basketball teams do it all the time. Baseball teams do it all the time. Is it the right thing to do? No, it's not. But it's a way that you can rebirth your franchise, and that's what the Dolphins were doing in 2019. And anybody who says they weren't tanking, this is my argument to them. That season, there were 27 players who were claimed off the waiver wires or signed off practice squads. Many of them, multiple times, they would be claimed on Tuesday, practice on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and start a game on Sunday. That's unheard of.
Yeah.
That is tanking. I bring to the example the Pittsburgh game, Monday night Pittsburgh game, where I felt like they called horrible plays in order to let the Pittsburgh Steelers back into the game. Now, was Brian Flores completely on board with it? No, clearly he wasn't. But was that the strategy the Miami Dolphins were using, wink, wink, to rebuild their franchise and end up with an elite quarterback? It certainly was.
But the allegations here of $100,000 to lose a game, that's where I want to stick here. And then his attorneys, we heard Brian Flores' attorney say today that they have corroborative evidence. So what does that mean? Are we going to see a possible wire transfer or something like that? But there's the $100,000 alleged in this lawsuit. Yes. And there's hey, let's bring some guys in from the bench, right? And let's tank that way. As you're talking about an exchange of finances, of money alleged here versus, there's other ways to tank. Like I want to see the third string out there. Am I right?
And this is why this lawsuit is so important. And that is one of the smoking guns. And the discovery phases of lawsuits are the dangerous phases, at least the dangerous phases for the NFL. And that's part of the reason why you saw Colin Kaepernick, receive a settlement as opposed to the lawsuit continuing to progress. The discovery phase could be damning, could force Steve Ross as an owner to have to sell the organization. So, it'll be interesting to see, one, whether it's not going to be picked up as a class action lawsuit. Because remember, this lawsuit is filed for Brian Flores on behalf of everybody who has been negatively impacted by the racial discrimination that the league has had for years. And this goes back years. And if you read the lawsuit, I mean, we're bringing up history we're bringing up every negative racial undertone and there are plenty of them, that the league has had. And these are all embarrassing, shameful, as every league has had. This is Black History Month, and I'm watching ESPN, and every commercial they're talking about what should be viewed as a shameful period in the history of sports, but it's just Black history. And I think at some point in time, Colin Kaepernick will be viewed as a martyr for the NFL, and so will Brian Flores, because he really has jeopardized his career and his future earnings for a cause that he believes is just, which is to create the necessary change to create an equal playing field for African Americans and minorities.
And he said that he's fully aware that this is a huge risk, and he loves the game of football. He loves coaching football. He thinks he has said that he has a talent and a gift to coach and to lead on the field, but that he's aware that he may have just eliminated his chances of possibly getting picked up as a coach elsewhere. But do you think that there's another side of this coin here, Omar? Do you think another team may see this risk and say this is an opportunity to make a change?
It's part of this is the what people don't understand is the NFL is owned by the old boys club. And it becomes clear to me when you go to the owners meetings, which will be here in Palm Beach, and you're in this hotel with $400 a night stays, and they've got their kids and people, kids that are worth millions, if not billions of dollars. And this is about protecting each other and protecting their golden goose. Keep in mind, when Stephen Ross bought the Dolphins, I believe 12 years ago, the team was worth $1.1 billion. Here we are, fast forward, and it's worth like $4.5 billion. And that's a conservative estimate. So this is about, growing wealth and prosperity and this elite country club of owners. And unfortunately, there's no way to change that. And that's part of the issue that's going on right now. Is there is an issue about the hiring that this elite country club does on a regular basis, to hiring people that make them feel comfortable, hiring people that they can relate to. And that's not necessarily fair to those who are qualified candidates who deserve the opportunity to become head coaches or second head coaches, or have a chance to elevate themselves to become an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator, or an executive.
There's the executives at the front office, right? There's the general managers, there's the coaching positions, and there's the ownership.
And what people will be surprised, and this has always bothered me and troubled me, is that the people who are running most of these organizations have never played football, and basically know the right people, or have the right connections, or work for the right people, and that's or nepotism. And I've always viewed that as a problem. And they don't put the people who have football backgrounds, who have football experiences, necessarily in charge of these organizations. And I always find that quite disturbing. And I always wonder, why is that? They rely on a lot of these people who played the game to evaluate the talent and help them pick the talent, but they just won't put them in charge. And I've always found that to be a little bit troubling, if not disturbing.
Omar, one of the things I wrote down here while you were speaking, you said this could be damning for Stephen Ross. We're talking about ownership, how this is passed down. Could it be damning? What does accountability look like? Will we see accountability? Do you think that this could be a different situation? How do we change that?
Understand that Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, works for Stephen Ross. These 32 or 31 owners, because Green Bay Packers are publicly owned, they're his boss. So unless the other owners come down on Stephen Ross for doing the exact same thing that they do on a regular basis, the Dolphins weren't the first and will not be the last team to tank. Have they ever incentivized tanking with money? We will soon find out, because Hugh Jackson is alleging that might have taken place in Cleveland. This is a can of worms, a hornet's nest that you really don't want to hit. And to Brian Flores' credit, he had the bravery to hit the hornet's nest. And now the question is, what's going to happen now that the hornet nest has been disturbed? And, the underbelly of the NFL has been exposed. What will the league do? And they've already been working ineffectively to create the necessary change. I think Brian Flores has made sure that, it's probably going to be forced to happen involuntarily.
I have a comment here, Omar, I want to share with you from a viewer just sent to me from Fred Schmidt, who's watching. Fred, thanks for tuning in today. He says, in part, quote, "I think Flores was the best thing to happen to the Dolphins, and they screwed that up too. Regardless of what you think of the man, he deserves more than a sham of an interview," he says.
Well, he certainly wasn't a sham of an interview with the Dolphins. He was, the Dolphins hired him. He was the first African-American coach that they hired. And more than likely, if Mike McDaniels gets the job, he's the 49ers offensive coordinator. He's an individual who has a biracial background. He's viewed as the front runner for the job. They're going to hire another minority. And that's not how Stephen Ross operates. Now, should he have been the front runner for some of these other jobs that are out there? Absolutely. But most of these executives know who they want to hire. They have their friends. They have their relationships. These guys have been tabbed as the future of this regime or this organization, and they rarely ever stray from that. That's part of the reason why Eric Bieniemy hasn't taken the job, hasn't gotten the job, and despite the impressive job that he's done with the Chiefs. It's the reason why Jim Caldwell, who produced winning seasons with the Detroit Lions, and everybody knows how hard that is to do if you follow football. There's a reason why Marvin Lewis, 14 years with one organization, has struggled to find a second opportunity as a head coach in the NFL. What this lawsuit is about is it's about all of those individuals, and it's about the Houston Texans head coach who just got fired after 1 year, so Steve Wilkes, who got fired after 1 year. The unfair circumstances and situations that African American and people of color have to go through to, one, get a head coaching position or get a general manager position, and then two, keep it.
Omar, what jarred me yesterday is we had this breaking news. We were leading with this breaking news on air, right, on NBC6. And then a few stories down, we were celebrating Tom Brady, who at the same time confirmed his retirement. And we were excited about Tom Brady. It's almost like, and we're 2 weeks away from the Super Bowl, right, which is going to air right here on NBC6. Got to throw that out there. And people are going to watch. People have always watched. There's the law of supply and demand, right? People love the NFL. People love the sport. So people are still watching these games on Sunday nights and on Monday night. So do you think that this is gonna impact that? Do you think that the conversation just needs to continue along with, the game on the side?
I think the conversation needs to continue. I would be very pleasantly surprised and pleased if the conversation continues through the Super Bowl and more coaches or more players relay their experiences or what they've seen, or, I hear it all the time, and these are stories that people are willing to share publicly. Brian Flores has shared his publicly, and he's turned it into a class action lawsuit, which encourages others to come forward as well and share their experiences. This is not a secret about the NFL. This is the NFL's dirty little secret. The most people in the NFL know that they're vehemently fighting against this league being like the NBA. You hear that all the time. They don't want it to be like the NBA. It's a players-driven league, and African Americans have too much control, and they feel like they have to hire minorities as coaches. And the NFL does not want that. Unfortunately, that's not fair to the people like Brian Flores, the people like Jim Caldwell, the people like Marvin Lewis, the people who have worked and labored 20 years like Brian Flores to work their way up for this opportunity. And then even though this opportunity doesn't go the way that he likes, he still had a strong enough resume that should have made him a front runner for one of these other 8 jobs that are out there, but it didn't.
In my reporting, especially during the pandemic of when the world of sports shut down, I had multiple interviews and multiple conversations with Jason Jenkins of the Miami Dolphins, one of the faces there and with the Miami Dolphins organization. And, this organization was out there. The field might have been quiet, but they were out there in the community. They were putting food into the trunks of the people here in our community. I know that they were working with restaurants, with Black-owned restaurants, to make sure that they were keeping them open and that they were the ones that were providing the food and then cooking the food for this community. Very active, especially in a time that the community needed it the most. So with these allegations that are broken down with how Flores says that he was treated differently because he's Black. I guess the question is, for the community, was this a facade? Is this just a plan?
I would struggle to agree with Brian Flores, and I don't necessarily think that that's what the lawsuit says, that he was treated differently by the Miami Dolphins because he was Black. I think
he was saying this morning, in his interviews this morning,
I think I don't think it was a sham. I think Miami Dolphins efforts are genuine. I think their intentions are genuine. I think their actions speak for themselves. I think the issue that Brian Flores had with the Miami Dolphins was a struggle to have a healthy relationship. When the head coach doesn't do what the owner says, or is difficult to work with the general manager, or difficult to work with the quarterback, or difficult to work with, with players or people in the front office organization, for whatever reason, sometimes the relationship needs to be severed. And my biggest issue with Brian Flores, if the Dolphins had said we fired him because we didn't believe that he was able to hire a competent offensive staff to improve the team, that's true and valid. What they did say was that we fired him because we had, we struggled to collaborate with him. He was difficult. Basically, he was difficult to work with. I'm not necessarily certain or think it's fair that color is associated with it. I had issues with Brian Flores, and I'm an African-American man. So I don't think it's fair to associate color with it. Brian was a difficult person to work with.
I want to go ahead and real quickly put up the statement here from the Miami Dolphins, make sure that we're sharing what they have to say after this lawsuit. They say, quote, "We vehemently deny any allegations of racial discrimination and are proud of the diversity and inclusion throughout the organization." Goes on to read, "The implication that we acted in a manner inconsistent with the integrity of the game is incorrect. We will be withholding further comment on the lawsuit at this time." Again, that's a statement from the Miami Dolphins. Omar, last word here. What do you foresee happening next? And is there anything that the Miami Dolphins could do or should do to, I'll just leave it at that, could do or should do? What should be the next move from this organization?
The next move for the organization is to hire the next coach and conduct business as usual. I think this is a lawsuit that's going to take years to unpeel and unravel. First, it has to be determined whether or not it's worthy of being a class action lawsuit. The courts could throw it out. I don't think that they will throw it out, because I think there's a lot of merit to what the claim is and what the issue is. I wouldn't be surprised if Congress picks this up and brings people in to interview them. If you investigate the Deflategate and Bullygate, what I found disappointing was the NFL statement, which said that everything that Brian Flores said in the civil suit, the lawsuit, was the class action suit, was that it was without merit. And I'm sorry, I read all 58 pages of it. I read it twice, and it has plenty of merit to it. Now, the question is, can you prove all of those things? And the NFL wasn't, in their initial statement, they didn't seem like they were willing to investigate it, when these are claims that you should be willing to investigate because they impact the integrity of your league.
Do you think that Mr. Flores will get picked up as a coach by another team?
No. No, I'm sorry for laughing, but he is now in the Colin Kaepernick arena of untouchable individuals, where even though he's got talent and ability and deserves to be in the NFL, he's nuclear at this point. You can't sue the NFL, all 32 teams, and then expect them to employ you at the same time. And if that happens, that's a miracle, and would be the greatest stunt that the NFL has ever pulled.
And it'll be a story that if that were to happen, you'll certainly be breaking down in your column with the Sun Sentinel. We'll be talking about it here as well. If that happens, we will see lots will be evolving and changing. Hey, Omar, thank you so much for your time. Hey, who are you picking for the Super Bowl, by the way?
I am picking the Rams. I just think that they've got too much firepower. They built it to have an all-in approach. I don't think the Cincinnati Bengals are there, but hey, Joe Burrow, he's proven, hey, it pays to tank. He's an elite quarterback who got his team to the Super Bowl in year 2, so props to him.
I just show up for the chicken wings and the fun. That's all.
No pizza?
I mean, yeah, sure, I guess. It depends on how much beer's served, right? It's all in the game. Omar Kelly, columnist and writer with the Sun Sentinel, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. We certainly appreciate it this afternoon.
Thank you for having me, Roxy.
Thank you, Omar. Take care. And all of our viewers joining us this afternoon, we certainly thank you for your time as well. Continuing coverage across all of our NBC6 platforms and certainly on the air. I'm Roxanne Vargas alongside Omar Kelly. We thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. Have a great afternoon.